I'm Indy Nidell, and this is another episode of Out of the Ether, where I sit here in my chair of wisdom and read your most interesting, best, perhaps most controversial comments so the rest of you can hear them. David Bond, his name is Bond, David Bond, writes, "There's a lot of fascinating information on the sinking of the Lusitania in Erik Larson's book Dead Wake, and the event itself certainly merits its own special. For instance, the British Admiralty had a surprisingly vast amount of knowledge about German U-boats, in particular the area of operations for U-20. Room 40 is worth looking up. They were aware of the fact that the Lusitania was going to pass through U-20's area of operations, which is why they left so many warnings to the ship. However, considering how much of a high-value target the ship was, it remains a mystery how it was that the ship was inexplicably left unprotected by the Royal Navy. However, it is somewhat enlightening to know that Churchill was relentless in condemning Captain Turner for alleged negligence in handling the situation. That being said, a court found no evidence of there being any misconduct on his part, although his name was tarnished anyhow thanks to Churchill's persistence. This was because the Lusitania's sinking was about as chance a mishap as possible. The ship, upon reaching land, failed to know its exact location due to fog. It decided to sail along the shoreline until it could figure out where it was. Once it did so, it immediately turned out to deeper waters, incidentally mimicking a zigzag route. Upon doing so, visibility cleared, and it turned out that the Lusitania had turned right into U-20's path. While it should have taken 2 or even 3 torpedoes to sink the ship, the one torpedo, with only 2 total for U-20 to fire altogether, managed to cause a secondary explosion on the ship and caused it to sink in 18 minutes. Now, granted, Turner could have taken a more active approach to preventing the whole debacle, and in retrospect should have. Nevertheless, it is understandable that he didn't take the precautions that he did, considering how much faster his ship was compared to a U-boat, and considering that the ship was supposed to be prepared for that kind of emergency should the issue arise. Was he arrogant? Perhaps, but he certainly wasn't incompetent. Churchill buried him anyway, though, and this certainly begs interpretation. He very well could have been using Turner as a scapegoat so that he wouldn't also receive some of the blame for failing to protect the ship. Considering that Churchill was a man of reputation looking to climb the ranks further, this would come as no surprise. Interestingly, Churchill had written early in the war to the Board of Trade saying there ought to be as much merchant and civilian shipping as possible going from Britain to the United States, but ended the note by adding that if any of that shipping got into trouble, it would be all the better. Considering the motives that Churchill would have at that point to bury Turner and turn attention away from him and the Admiralty, the possibility that there was in fact a conspiracy to have the ship sunk by the Germans cannot be ruled out. At least this much is certain. There was plenty of blame to go around for the incident having happened, and certainly an unfair amount of that blame was aimed towards Turner. On another note, the Germans had received a tip that there were weapons on board the ship and had in fact sent 3 spies on board to document and later expose the secret manifest. However, they were caught, and in sinking the ship, the 3 spies were also killed. The Germans, in sinking the ship, were not necessarily one-dimensional villains trying to kill everyone on board. Not only had they received a tip regarding weapons on board, but in fact, when preparing to fire a second torpedo, the captain of U-20 saw the pandemonium on board the Lusitania and decided against firing that torpedo. With all of the negative imagery associated with the Germans, particularly from World War II, it is easy to forget that they were also human, a theme covered heavily in All Quiet on the Western Front. The sinking of the Lusitania was not the black and white, one-sided atrocity that it is often remembered to be. I hope this was a helpful and, more importantly, correct, and I would love to see a nuanced special on the subject, as it certainly merits an impartial perspective piece, assuming I haven't missed one already done by the channel. No, you haven't. Fantastic channel, by the way. I appreciate all of the work you guys have done to bring much needed attention back to a surprisingly dismissed period of history from my point of view. And there you have it. I'm pretty sure that most people out there did not know half of the stuff that I've just read out, and it would be very interesting to read the book that you actually mentioned. I'm curious about it because it is quite controversial, the stuff about the weapons and the stuff about who knew what, and certainly it's interesting to think that Churchill himself should have had some of the blame for the sinking of the Lusitania, and not just Captain Turner. Whatever the case, if you'd like to see our episode from the week the Lusitania was actually sunk, you can click right here for that. Don't forget to subscribe, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and we'll see you next time, and every time.